Hi everyone, I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Alexandra Chirilă. She's a PhD student at the Alexandru Ioan Cuza University of Iași, and she's going to talk about Connectionism's new wave. Alexandra?
Thank you. Unfortunately, I do not have anything to share on screen, so you'll just have to bear with me for the next 25 minutes. Today, we will go through what the new wave of Connectionism is and what this means for the revival, what this revival means for one of the two classical theories of philosophy of mind, the theories of John Searle and Daniel Dennett. We will start by defining what Connectionism is and how initially worked. Then we will go over what Connectionism is today. After that, our attention will switch to the theories of Searle and Dennett. After summarizing these two theories, we want to see if they are compatible with today's Connectionism and if they are of any use to AI researchers and philosophers. Connectionism used to be one of the most popular theories in the philosophy of mind during the 80s. Connectionism theorists believed that we could develop intellectual abilities in artificial agents using artificial neural networks. Connectionism represented an alternative to the prevalent theory stating that the mind works like a computer processing symbolic language. This latter theory is called the classical theory of mind. We will come back to this theory later, but for now, let us discuss what artificial neural networks used to look like. Computational and technological power was very scarce during that time, which means that even though scientists had brilliant ideas, they did not have the means to put them to good use. The initial artificial neural networks looked like a very simplified version of what we have today in Connectionism. These networks had input units, hidden units, and output units. The input units received the information, the hidden units processed said information, and the output units gave a response. These units were constructed in the likeness of neurons, so they behaved like neurons. The input units were analog to sensory neurons, output units to motor neurons, and while hidden units represented all other neurons. These initial artificial neural networks worked in a binary system, meaning that they could be only activated and deactivated without any degree, like switching a light on and off without being able to change its intensity. After it got through the input units and hidden units, the information would either get straight to the output units or be redirected towards other hidden units. This web of units is a simplified version of a biological neural network. But during the 90s, machine learning came to exist. And as Tom Michael Mitchell put it, the field of machine learning is concerned with the question of how to construct computer programs that can automatically improve with experience. However, recent developments have gone past machine learning, and this advanced technology is called deep learning. According to Deng and Yu, deep learning is a class of machine learning techniques that exploit many layers of information processing for supervised or unsupervised feature extractions and transformation, and for pattern analysis and classification. Deep learning represents Connectionism's new wave for at least two reasons as follows. Firstly, deep learning architectures reach a number of layers that were unimaginable for the scientists in the golden age of Connectionism. Old artificial neural networks only reached 1 to 2 layers deep of hidden units, whereas newer artificial neural networks can reach anywhere from 5 to hundreds of deep layers. This increases the accuracy of information processing. Moreover, it better mimics our biological neural network. Secondly, we've previously stated that old systems only worked in binary activation and deactivation. Newer artificial neural networks can sense nuances in inputs and processing. This is especially important for convolutional neural networks, which concern visual image analysis. AlphaGo and its better version, AlphaZero, have demonstrated the power of deep networks. To summarize, AlphaGo learned to play Go with little human impact, whereas AlphaZero is called so because it had zero human input. And it learned to play Go in roughly 24 hours by competing against itself, and it became the best Go player in the world. Another example of a successful deep network is DeepSpear, a network that learned to write poems and sonnets after analyzing enormous amounts of data. The latest trend in convolutional neural networks is DALE2, the image processing network, which creates a picture from user-written prompts. For example, we can ask DALE2 to generate an image of 2 deers eating dandelions on Mars, and this system will generate just that. Deep learning is of utmost importance for large companies. As Cameron Buchner stated, by 2016, Google had approximately 1,000 deep learning projects in development. However, before we proceed further with the theories of Searle and Dennett, we want to raise a concern about the state of the eye and why it's so difficult for strong AI to be implemented. In his paper, Artificial Intelligence Meets Natural Stupidity, Drew McDermott talks about issues that are just as relevant today as they were back when the paper was published. First, many researchers tend to talk as if an internal knowledge representation ought to be closely related to corresponding English sentences, and that operations on the structure should resemble human conversation. In other words, developers and engineers adopt everyday language to describe machine operations. But this leads to wishful thinking by overestimating the capabilities of deep networks. This linguistic approach to code writing and development has led us to believe that human language is a royal road to cognitive psyche. We often attribute understanding to objects around us. We say that the thermometer feels the temperature, or that the door knows to open itself when a person is around. But neither the thermometer nor the door feels or knows. Searle states that we use verbs like these because we tend to extend our intentionality and impose it on these artifacts. However, we cannot talk about intentionality in any machine situation. Notice how when I gave examples of functioning deep networks, I used verbs such as learn, play, and create. This is precisely the wishful thinking Drew McDermott warned us about. State-of-the-art AI is nowhere near strong AI, but we will continue to use verbs like these when describing deep networks. But we have to keep in mind that deep architectures only execute what they were made to do without any sign of consciousness. What has changed over the years of development is the speed of processing, computational power, depth of layers, and nuance sensing capabilities. So now that we've got that out of the way and we've established what connectionism and deep learning are, we can now jump into the theories of Searle and Dennett with everything we have discussed so far in mind. John Searle supports the biological naturalism view, which places consciousness in the field of biological phenomena. Searle believes that consciousness is superior to the biological level. In mind, Searle distinguishes between two types of reduction, causal and ontological. When it comes to causal reductions, an X phenomenon is causally reduced to a Y phenomenon if and only if X entirely results from Y's behavior. On the other hand, ontological reduction means that a phenomenon X is ontologically reduced to Y if and only if X is nothing else other than Y. The most crucial aspect of biological naturalism is that conscious and subjective states are part of actual phenomena. This means that our consciousness is not an illusion, nor can it be ontologically reduced to neurobiological activity. Consciousness cannot be ontologically reduced to neurobiology because this would mean a shift from first person to third person. Consciousness has, by definition, a first-person ontology, and as Searle put it, the meaning of the concept is lost if we redefine it in third-person terms. To consolidate his argument, Searle talks about identity theorists, which identify consciousness with a neurobiological process. He denies this identity, stating that we are dealing with a single event, with neurobiological and phenomenological traits. The same event is a succession of neural activations and also causes pain. John Moses Chua writes how Searle explains consciousness by dividing it into 3 moments. The first moment is physical, in which receptors react to an external stimulus, like the pinch of the skin, and send information to the brain. Then the neural activity begins. This process is observable and measurable. After the neurons process the input, the second moment begins, the sensation, in this case, pain, or qualia, the subjective phenomena, which is immeasurable and can only be sensed by the experiencing person. The second moment can only exist if we take the first person ontology into account, because, as I've previously said, this phenomenon cannot be discussed in third person terms. The third moment is the reaction, which is, again, observable and measurable, muscles tensing and rapid heart beating. Searle strongly believes that the mind cannot be compiled by software because programs cannot possess consciousness. To defend this statement, Searle proposes the already well-known thought experiment, the Chinese room argument. This argument underlines that no computational power can prove it possesses intentionality. We will not detail the Chinese room argument. I'm sure you're bored of it, nor will we discuss how it has been countered, but we will bring up a concept discussed in the first section, specifically the classical theory of the mind, which Searle seems to agree with. This is because the Chinese room argument concerns how an AI wouldn't be able to understand Chinese. But this reduces the AI problem to a symbolic processing issue, just as classical theorists suggest. Deep learning architectures can be programmed to work as a symbolic processing machine. Only deep networks are so much more advanced than what Searle had in mind when he first published the Chinese room argument. So the results would be better today than they would have been 30 years ago. So is Searle's theory compatible with deep artificial neural networks? Well, to some extent. Could a deep network learn Chinese? Yes, but only when it comes to syntax, whereas semantics is still foreign to state-of-the-art technologies. Apart from this, there is another interesting aspect to be discussed. Suppose qualia can be causally reduced to neurobiological activity. In that case, this means that if we supposedly copy every single aspect and detail of our neural network, we will end up with a system that possesses qualia. However, this approach would lead to 2 functioning systems that we cannot understand. If we cannot understand human qualia, we wouldn't be able to understand or even recognize artificial qualia. Simply put, we wouldn't be able to tell if an artificial agent indeed possesses consciousness or just acts as it does. Therefore, even if we had the means to recreate our neural network to the smallest detail, we wouldn't know for sure if we were standing in front of an actual artificial agent. However, developing such an agent could help us better understand how our mind works. If Searle is correct, then creating a one-to-one artificial neural network will allow consciousness to exist. If that's the case, this system will help us study our minds like studying a mirror. Then it's stated in From Bacteria to Bach and Back that we are having trouble explaining how our mind works because it is so close and personal. So maybe by externalizing consciousness, we can study it as an impersonal object with no connection to ourselves whatsoever. Dennett, on the other hand, believes that all cognitive processes can be reduced to a computational machine. This makes Dennett a reductionist because he states that the mind is nothing more than neural activity, without any superior phenomena to determine the existence of mental activity. In one of his latest works, From Bacteria to Bach and Back, one of the key concepts is called strange inversion of reasoning, One good example of such inversion is the transition from geocentrism to heliocentrism. Specifically, this transition is an inversion because universally accepted truths are turned upside down. Dennett believes that competence without comprehension is an inversion. In other words, the generally accepted opinion is that we gain competencies in a particular field after we've gained enough knowledge and understanding. However, the author believes that competence is not a sum of understandings, but understandings are a sum of competencies. In the footsteps of Darwin and Alan Turing, Dennett believes that the simplest life forms and machines are competent to do what they must do, but they do not possess any comprehension whatsoever. We tend to anthropomorphize plants and bacteria to better understand their behavior. The problem with anthropomorphizing is that we credit them not just with competencies, but also with comprehension of action, benefits, or reasons. In Queening Qualia, Dennett denies the existence of qualia. To consider this subjective trait as part of experience, the author believes we should be able to tell when there has been a change in qualia, just as we can sense that there's a change in any other bodily state. The author concludes the paper by stating that we cannot sense whether a change in qualia has occurred. So therefore, qualia cannot be considered as part of experience. Dennett opposes Searle, if that wasn't already clear. And to support his claim of qualia not existing, he proposes the concept of Cartesian gravity. I'm going to briefly summarize it. Let us imagine a mind explorer who wants to begin his work starting with his own mind. The explorer is at home on planet Descartes, meditating at the task of unraveling the mysteries of consciousness. He watches the external universe from the first-person perspective. From this point, he relies on the contents of his mind to always know where he stands. This Cartesian gravity is the force that keeps him in an egocentric position. His internal monologue is, here I am a conscious being, well familiarized with the contents with the ideas in my mind, which I know better than anyone else because they're mine. But meanwhile, from far away comes another explorer, armed, the scientific one, armed with tools, maps, models, and theories, and so on. He too is determined to unravel the mysteries of consciousness. However, the closer he gets to planet Descartes, he starts to feel more and more uncomfortable. He is forcibly pulled into a perspective he knows he must avoid, but this force is too strong. As soon as he lands on planet Descartes, his third-person perspective, which has an objective overview, is shifted into a first-person perspective. Moreover, he finds himself unable to use any of the tools that he brought with him on the journey. The Cartesian gravity cannot be bypassed. The shift from third person to first person is inevitable. And it is also an excellent example of a strange inversion of reasoning. Dennett believes that qualia are an illusion that are very different to discard because the Cartesian gravity is too strong. This example illustrates how first person and third person views cannot coexist. And this has led Dennett to believe that even affirming the existence of qualia is a contradiction. Instead, the author proposes the multiple drafts model. In Consciousness Explained, Dennett analyzed an alternative to Cartesian gravity. Specifically, he believes that ideas and perceptions are multiple narrative fragments, also called drafts, which are in various editing phases, just as we would edit a document. According to him, these drafts serve multiple purposes, but they do not end up in a specific area, such as a central processing unit. Instead, they are edited in the brain, which causes thinking. Asking oneself which drafts are conscious or which drafts can lead to a conscious state automatically places the subject on planet Descartes. For Dennett, consciousness is some virtual machine, an involved computer that shapes the brain activity. Multiple drafts model has determined the author to state that the self is the center of narrative gravitation, and all phenomena of consciousness can be explained as the activity of a virtual machine. Then it believes that if that's the case, then in principle, a suitably programmed robot with a silicon-based brain would be conscious and it would have a self. So is Dennett's theory of any use to researchers? What can we say is that it is more in line with what researchers have in mind than Searle's theory is. Although more instinctively plausible, Searle's theory puts more obstacles in the way of engineers. However, let us take a look at Planet Descartes' thought experiment. If Dennett is correct, and constructing a silicon brain is what it takes for a conscious machine to exist, then it means we could bypass the Cartesian gravity. Studying an external consciousness would allow the usage of every scientific tool we possess without us being pulled into the first-person perspective. So far, Dennett's theory seems to be more practical and aligned with current technological goals. But then again, just as we talked about Searle, how could we know for sure that the artificial agent we constructed indeed possesses consciousness? We don't know if qualia exists, but there's a practical nature to it. As Raul Arrabales put it, on one hand, a comprehensive understanding of qualia might make possible the building of conscious machines. On the other hand, the path to complete understanding of qualia in biology might just lay through the research on new computational models. Specifically, by using Dennett's strange inversion of reasoning, maybe we need not understand human qualia to construct artificial qualia. Maybe developing more advanced deep networks and computational models is what will indeed help us understand consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for the wonderful presentation. Everyone is applauding you online as well. Well, let's go to the Q&A session. I see there's already a question from Catalin. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Alexandra, for this very interesting presentation. So my question regards the following facts. So you are discussing how the deep neural network may have or may not have an impact on some old theories, right? But I'm wondering how the fact that we have now more evolved neural networks changes the discussion, because it seems to be the same old discussion about how a physical system, symbol system can lead or cannot lead to a mind or to consciousness. I don't understand how a more evolved neural network changes the discussion.
Thank you for your question. I was actually discussing about this with a neuroscientist friend in Germany, and I asked her the same question. We're still asking the same question. Will these deep networks help us mimic the neural network? Well, the question is, it will, but we still don't have the computational power we need to reconstruct a one-to-one copy of our neural networks, because this would mean a recreation of every single neuron we possess, and also the connection between these neurons. And some neurons can be explained with an equation of, I don't know, 3 rows, and some neurons can be recreated with pages of equation in order to summarize their behavior and their purpose. So it's a matter of time.
How would this then, let's say, the Chinese room argument, how would then this be different applied to a more evolved neural network than to a normal neural network? Because it seems to be exactly the same. I mean, some will say still, yeah, this looks very nice, but it doesn't understand anything.
And it won't, because this is a problem of semantics. This is not a problem of artificial neural networks and how deep the layers can go and how much processing power we have. It's about how do we solve the semantic problems.
Yeah, but then how do we solve? Because then how we are going to have a deep neural network that mimics the whole brain and doesn't understand anything? Because it means that it's going to escape mind consciousness because we understand things. So
So even if we create a one-to-one brain, silicon-based brain, and we figure out, no, this is not the way, there's something else, we still can't figure out the semantics, then we will still have solved something. We will still have gotten out of the way a question that we currently have and we don't have an answer for.
But how we are going to know that we are successful, I'm wondering, not by creating a conscious machine?
Maybe or maybe not. Maybe a conscious machine, not a conscious machine, but maybe an extremely advanced deep network, which has a specific purpose again, will help us better understand how our brain works, because we still haven't figured that out, let alone consciousness. We don't know how the physical brain works. We haven't mapped every single surface of it. So maybe deep networks will help us map the brain, and then we'll just pass the ball from one another into solving tiny steps in search of strong AI.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, for Cătălin, for the question, and Alexandra for your elaborated answer. Chingis, I think, has another question. Go ahead.
Yes, actually a follow-up for the Cătălin's question, because what he was asking is that, okay, how are we going to know at the end if that being is conscious or not? But we have the same problem for other minds, and we don't have access to other minds. But we can more or less get some how to say, hints if there is a consciousness, or if there is an understanding or not. I guess, what do you think? Do you think this kind of hints, for example, the hints that we get from other minds, other people, can we also find this kind of games that to play and at the end conclude that, yeah, maybe there is consciousness, or maybe the guy in the Chinese room actually understands some things? What kind of hints can satisfy us to say that, okay, we are more or less okay to conclude something like this?
I'm sensing that these are actually at least two questions. One concerning how we recognize consciousness in other human beings, and another one is how will we be able to recognize consciousness in an artificial agent. When it comes to human consciousness, I think I have a very unsatisfactory answer. I believe that we see consciousness in others because we identify with them. So it's only by analogy, by association. I see that the other person looks like me, talks like me, maybe laughs at the same memes as I do. So then I conclude, hey, this person must be like me. They must have a self. If I think and if I believe I have a self, then recognizing aspects of myself in others will lead me to believe that they also have a self and a consciousness. And for the second question, I think that we need really tiny baby steps in achieving artificial consciousness. I don't think that, I don't know, 50 years from now or 100 years from now, we will have one aha moment. Okay, we've reached artificial consciousness. I think there will be steps back and forth between constructing better artificial agents or better deep networks, and them helping us discover more about ourselves and our minds and our brain.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, what you said about the similarities between us and other minds is very important, because when we think about AI's possible situation in society and this kind of things, in these arguments, what you said is very important. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer, and to you, Chingis, for the question. If there are no more questions from the online audience, we will go straight to those live here. So, Steph, would you like to come? I'll get you. Would you like to come here so that you can have both the discussion and a meta discussion?
Thank you. Kindly, man. So, thank you for the presentation. It was a very nice one. In fact, it is a subject that I'm very interested in. And I have two questions. In fact, it's quite a small one, a tricky question. First one, do you think that the Alpha Zero knows that he's the best player in the world?
I don't think it's been programmed to be self-aware of how good he is. I don't think there's a scoreboard inside his program that lets him know that
So
he's the first.
the competence itself doesn't tell us too much about us.
No,
The competence,
no,
okay, the computational power,
no.
because the machines are far away from us.
Yes,
They're very,
yes.
very.
Light,
Yes.
light of years away.
Now, let's go to the most important point of the discussion. Between Searle and Bennett, we agree that there is a problem of semantics. They both agree on that there is a problem of semantics, and it started from the Chinese dream experiment. But Bennett has an explanation about how it's possible for a system to acquire semantic values, or to attribute semantic values to things. Do you know that theory?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
It's if I remember well, it's called the approximation theory. He's saying that a token, by repeating it and approximating it, can become a type. So you can create a meaning from experiencing many times through our evolution the same things. For example, we know we have the abstract idea of a circle because we did something like this many times in our history. Do you think that's possible?
I think
This approach on semantics.
I think that it is possible to work like that for humans, but so far deep networks are only programmed for very singular tasks and very particular tasks. I don't know if they could develop semantics in such a broad way that we perceive semantics. We don't have a multi-purpose
But
deep network.
they have any kind of semantics.
No, only the meaning that we assign to them. When we are talking about convolutional neural networks, for example, we are uploading, I don't know, 10 terabytes of pictures of flowers. And we tell him, this is a flower. This is also a flower.
Right.
And then we will feed him more. We'll feed it. It's not a person. We will feed it more pictures. And we will ask it, is this a flower? And based on the analysis that he made back then with thousands of bytes of information, he will say yes or no. But he will make mistakes. It will make
It
mistakes.
doesn't matter. It can be very good in finding a flower.
Yes.
But the
This is how
problem
it
is
works.
he doesn't know that
No.
is a flower.
No, he just,
And this was the Catalan question.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
semantic problem.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
So thank you, Stefan and Alexandra, for this discussion, adding this to the QE for the roundtable. Victor has another question.
Yeah, so basically, from that, I will also answer to Katarina and also talk
Lovely.
about the
Go
issues.
ahead.
And I want to start by saying that Bennett has his heart in the right place. He gets to the right conclusions. His methods are wrong. So the idea in neural networks, the issue is that basically there is only a matter of mathematics, right? Until we get to create the same number of neurons. But the only thing that we cannot do is the neural jump, right? So the connections between not necessarily one layer to the other, but inside our brain, we have certain synapses that we cannot replicate so far. So what you said, and that's the thing that sort of pointed me towards this question, is there a difference between possessing and acting as if you would possess? So
Yes. Yes, there
you
is
would
a
say so. So an AI, it's behaving exactly like it possesses consciousness. How can you tell the difference between?
This is exactly what I'm asking in this paper.
Exactly.
If we take Bennett's theories into account, then we don't have to ask these questions, because he certainly believes that there is no second moment, as Searle says, but it isn't instinctively for us. We don't want to say that there's nothing more than neural activity. but we don't know for sure. Because just as we can't tell for sure if another person is consciousness, we only do it by making an analogy between me and them.
So, and you said that the idea was to create a one-to-one microchip from silicon, and that's fine. So you have that one-to-one replica, and that replica will also replicate one, because if it doesn't replicate what I'm doing, it doesn't fully replicate me. So it means it also replicates my consciousness.
Yes.
In that context, is there any difference between replicating exactly consciousness and having consciousness? That's the question here.
I think if this artificial agent we've constructed that mimics one-to-one our neural networks, it would act as if it possesses consciousness, if it would behave just like I behave. But in order for it to be conscious, it would need to go out of this way.
No, because the idea is, you know, the twin Earth experiment, right? So it's basically replicating one-to-one. It has the same experiences, everything the same, the consciousness the same. So where would there be a difference? How could you tell that that's just replicated consciousness instead of it being consciousness?
This is what I've answered before when I said that the point of creating a one-to-one neural network is not exactly getting consciousness at once. Okay, we will make a one-to-one neural network and then we'll have consciousness. I think this network would help us better understand some parts of our brains, or maybe some parts of our consciousness. But I personally do not think that recreating such a network would possess consciousness. I don't think it would even mimic consciousness. I think there's more to it.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, we differ in that view, but thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great talk. Thank you all for bearing with us. And thank you, Raluca, for the suggestion. We will now, yes, another applause, I think, from Cătălin.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, they're right.
Thank you. Well, let's do this. Thank you again. And now we are going to have a lunch break. So see you guys back here at 4 p.m.